They said the rumor was ridiculous. They said it was laughable. Yet somehow, it refused to die. And tonight, the baseball world is asking a single question: is Jason Hayward's successor, Chris Taylor's brother-in-arms, the Dodgers' own forgotten spark plug, James Outman Comfort, really packing his bags for Chicago? Because the whispers coming out of Los Angeles weren't soft. They weren't subtle. They were sharp, mocking, almost theatrical. He's going to the Cubs. Please. That's hilarious. But behind the sarcasm, something else was hiding, something colder, something that made the story far more compelling than anyone wanted to admit. It begins with a leak no one expected. A leak that said Comfort was evaluating options. Options. The Dodgers. The richest, most powerful, most ruthless roster-building machine in baseball. Since when did their players go hunting for options? Unless they weren't being given any. And that's where the tone of the coverage changed. Sports insiders didn't just report the Cubs rumor, they laughed at it. They dismissed it. They threw shade that spread across the league like wildfire. Chicago. Really? That's the best he could find. One headline smirked. But underneath that cruelty was a truth the Dodgers tried to keep hidden. A truth fans were starting to piece together. A truth that would rattle the calm surface of the LA Empire. Comfort wasn't being pushed. He was being squeezed. Squeezed by a team that had outgrown him. Squeezed by expectations he could no longer meet. Squeezed by a lineup so stacked, so historic, so dangerous, that even a solid role player felt like a cracked tile on an otherwise perfect floor. And suddenly the laughter didn't sound funny anymore. It sounded uncomfortable. Because as analysts mocked the Cubs rumor, they accidentally revealed the loneliness no one talks about, the loneliness of a player stuck between being good and being needed. Comfort wasn't a star, but he wasn't a nobody either. He was in that fragile middle, the place where careers quietly disappear. And maybe that's why Chicago entered the conversation. The Cubs weren't mocking him. They weren't calculating how to replace him. They were offering something the Dodgers no longer could: a new beginning. A place to breathe. A place to matter. But Los Angeles didn't like that narrative. So instead, they turned the rumor into a punchline. The Dodgers media played defense with humor, with sarcasm, with the kind of arrogance only a dynasty in the making can afford to wield. Yet the more they laughed, the more the baseball world leaned in. Because buried beneath those smirks was a question that wouldn't go away. Why would Comfort even consider leaving? Why would a Dodgers player eye a team that's still rebuilding? Why would he walk away from a culture built on winning, discipline, and unlimited potential? Unless things inside the Dodgers clubhouse weren't as perfect as they appeared. Unless Comfort had grown tired of waiting for a moment that might never arrive. Unless he felt invisible. And invisibility, in baseball or life, can be far more painful than failure. Teammates described Comfort as quiet, thoughtful, a guy who didn't complain, but also a guy who sensed the writing on the wall far earlier than the headlines did. He saw the Dodgers' future outfield forming without him. He saw younger, faster, louder talent rising behind him. He saw his innings shrink, his leverage fade, his role dissolve into something that sounded flattering on paper but felt empty in reality. Utility presence. Depth piece. Insurance option. The cruelest phrases in sports, the labels that steal a player's identity without touching his salary. And so, slowly, the rumor didn't feel laughable anymore. It felt logical, human, inevitable. Because every player, superstar or bench role, has a moment when they look in the mirror and ask, do I still belong here? Maybe Comfort asked that question. Maybe he didn't like the answer. And maybe that's why Chicago suddenly looked less like a downgrade, and more like freedom. A chance to start fresh. A chance to play without a shadow. A chance to redefine who he was, not in the Dodgers dynasty, but in his own story. The mocking headlines could not erase that truth. The sarcastic commentary could not hide the ache behind his silence. And the league, watching from afar, began to understand the real drama. This wasn't about the Dodgers losing a player. This was about a man choosing to exist again. And in that choice lies something inspiring, something every athlete, every fan, every human being understands deep inside. Sometimes, walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes, leaving the biggest stage isn't failure. Sometimes, choosing yourself is the bravest decision of all. And whether Comfort stays in Los Angeles, or heads to Chicago, or finds a new horizon entirely, one thing is certain. He is no joke. He is no headline. He is no punchline for sarcastic reporters. He is a player reclaiming his story. A story that the world is finally beginning to hear, not with laughter, but with respect. And in the end, maybe that's the true power behind this rumor. Not the move itself, but the courage to consider it.